The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light, and its ceiling opened to the stars themselves. Representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from massive creatures to beings of pure energy contained in magnetic fields. This was the heart of galactic civilization, the place where the fate of trillions was decided with a single vote. Ambassador Lisa Harmon stood at the petitioner's platform, a small circle of metal barely 10 feet wide. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades spent fighting battles she could never win. Behind her stood two aides, young diplomats who still believed that patience and reason could change minds. Lisa had lost that belief long ago, but she never let it show. The petition from the human collective for full membership status is now before the council, announced the speaker, an official whose four arms gestured in ritual patterns. This is the 47th such petition in 300 standard years. How does the council vote? Lisa watched the holographic display as the votes appeared. Red lights filled the chamber like drops of blood falling into water, not a single green light among them. Unanimous rejection, just like every time before. The High Counselor, a creature named, rose from his seat. His gray skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that indicated amusement. The vote is complete. The humans are once again full membership. Perhaps in another decade, they will have evolved sufficiently to merit reconsideration. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Lisa had heard this laughter before. She had heard it when humanity first petitioned for membership. She had heard it when they asked for fair trade agreements. She had heard it when they begged for medical technology to stop a plague that killed 60 million people on the colony world of New Helsinki. The representative, a massive creature covered in armored plates, leaned forward in his seat. "Tell me, human, why do you continue to waste our time? Your species lives barely a century. You breed like vermin. You fight among yourselves over resources that any civilized species would share freely. You are children playing at the feet of adults." "We have contributed much to this council," Lisa replied, her voice steady. "Our engineers solved the atmospheric crisis. Our doctors developed the cure for bone rot. Our diplomats mediated the border dispute between thee and the Syndicate of Moons." "Contributions befitting a servant species," said dismissively. "You did what was expected of you. A trained animal can perform tricks. That does not make it equal to its master." More laughter, louder this time. Lisa looked around the chamber. She saw contempt in 1,000 alien eyes. She saw creatures who had accepted humanity's help, humanity's sacrifice, humanity's blood and sweat, and given nothing in return but mockery. 300 years of service. 300 years of hope that things would change. 300 years of her predecessors standing on this same platform, hearing these same insults, and returning home to tell their people to be patient, to keep trying, to believe that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow was never different. Lisa straightened her spine, she folded her hands in front of her, and she smiled. "We understand," she said softly. "We will no longer burden this council with our presence." Blinked his four eyes. "What did you say?" "I said we understand. Humanity thanks the council for its clarity. We will not petition again." The laughter died. A strange silence fell over the chamber. The representative shifted in his seat, his armor plates clicking together. "You speak as though you have a choice, human. You need us. Your species cannot survive without access to council trade routes and technology." "Perhaps," Lisa said. "Perhaps not, we shall see." She bowed once, a formal gesture of farewell that humans had used for centuries. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, her two aides falling into step behind her. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. "You will be back," called after her. "Your kind always comes crawling back." Lisa did not turn around. She did not respond. She simply walked through the great doors and disappeared into the corridor beyond. 72 hours later, the human embassy on the council station went dark. The staff had packed everything and boarded transport ships without a word to anyone. The ambassador's residence was empty, the furniture removed, the walls bare. Only a single item remained on the desk in the main office, a small data crystal containing a formal notice of withdrawal from all council agreements, treaties, and obligations. On 100 worlds, the same scene repeated. Human traders closed their shops and vanished. Human doctors left hospitals without explanation. Human engineers walked away from half-completed projects. Human ships undocked from ports and jumped to coordinates that no council navigation system could track. Within a week, there was not a single human in council space. Admiral Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the carrier Endurance, watching the last transport ship clear the final checkpoint. Behind them, the glittering stations of the council faded into the darkness between stars. All personnel accounted for, Admiral, his executive officer reported. We are clear of council territory. Any pursuit? No, sir, they seem to think we're bluffing. Brooks nodded slowly. He had served in the fleet for 30 years. He had escorted diplomats to council meetings. He had watched his people be humiliated, insulted, and dismissed. He had buried friends who died in conflicts the council could have prevented with a single vote. They always thought we were bluffing, he said quietly. They thought we needed them. They never considered that we simply chose to stay. What happens now, sir? Brooks turned away from his face was calm, but his eyes held something cold and patient. Now we go home, we build, we grow, we become everything they said we could never be. And when the darkness comes for them, as it always does, they will look to the stars and find only silence. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, and humanity vanished from the known galaxy. The council laughed about it for months. They made jokes about the human tantrum and placed bets on how long it would take for the vermin to come crawling back. A year passed, then 5, then 10. The jokes became less frequent. The bets were quietly forgotten. Humanity did not return. And in the vast emptiness beyond council space, something ancient began to stir. 50 years passed like water through open fingers. The galaxy moved on, and humanity became a footnote in history books that fewer and fewer beings bothered to read. Counselor sat in his private study, surrounded by shelves of data crystals and ancient texts. He was old now, his gray skin faded to a pale silver, his bioluminescent patterns dim and irregular. Most of his generation had already passed into whatever afterlife they believed in. He remained, stubbornly clinging to life, haunted by memories he could not explain. A young scholar stood before him, a named Al who had spent 2 decades researching a species that everyone else had forgotten. His armored plates were from years of traveling to remote archives and abandoned colonies, searching for fragments of information that others considered worthless. You asked for my report, Counselor, Al said, placing a data crystal on the desk. I have completed my research into the human departure. And what have you found? Asked, his voice tired. Something troubling. Activated the crystal, and holographic displays filled the room. Charts, graphs, incident reports, testimonials from species across the galaxy. The old counselor leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing as he studied the data. During their 3 centuries of observer status, Al explained, humans involved themselves in over 12,000 significant incidents across council space. They mediated 743 territorial disputes, developed cures for 61 diseases that threatened multiple species, repaired failing terraforming systems on 94 worlds, and provided emergency aid during 212 natural disasters. We knew they were useful, said dismissively. That is why we tolerated them. With respect, Counselor, I do not think you understand the scope of what I am saying. Al manipulated the display, bringing up a specific file. The atmospheric crisis. You mentioned this yourself at the final petition hearing. Do you know what actually happened? The humans fixed some machinery, standard maintenance work. No, the atmosphere was collapsing due to a cascade failure in their planetary shield network. Engineers estimated it would take 50 years and 3 trillion credits to repair. Human engineers solved the problem in 6 months using improvised technology that your own scientists still do not fully understand. They asked for nothing in return. Not money, not recognition, not even a formal thank you. Said nothing. Al continued, his voice growing more intense. The bone-rot plague that nearly destroyed my people 30 years before the humans left. Our medical science had no answer. We were facing extinction. Human doctors worked without sleep for 8 months to develop a cure. They tested it on themselves first because they did not want to risk lives. 17 human researchers died before they found a formula that worked. I did not know that, admitted quietly. No one knows, because no one wanted to know. We accepted their help and then told ourselves they were primitive vermin who contributed nothing. Al shut off the display. I have spent 20 years looking for evidence that we were right about them. I found the opposite. Everywhere I looked, I found humans quietly solving problems that no one else could solve, helping people who would never thank them, and asking for nothing but the chance to be treated as equals. Stared at his desk for a long moment. The memories were coming back now, memories he had buried under decades of comfortable certainty. He remembered Lisa Harmon's face when she bowed and walked away. He remembered the smile on her lips. At the time, he had thought it was the smile of a defeated creature trying to maintain dignity. Now he wondered if it was something else entirely. "Have you traced where they went?" he asked. "I have tried. Their departure was perfectly coordinated. Every human in Council space left within the same week, using ships equipped with drives we cannot track. Our long-range sensors have detected energy signatures in the outer spiral arms, but the distances are too great for accurate readings. Estimate their population." Al hesitated. Based on their known growth rates and the time elapsed, somewhere between 50 and 100 billion, possibly more. Felt something cold settle in his stomach. The human population when they left had been 12 billion, and their technology. Unknown. But if their rate of advancement continued as it was, they may have surpassed us decades ago. The old counselor rose from his chair and walked to the window. Outside, the great station orbited a dying star, its light red and weak. The galaxy stretched beyond, a river of stars that had seemed so full of promise when he was young. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "The Council will not listen, they never listen." "Because something is happening at the Galactic Rim," Al said. 3 colony worlds have gone silent in the past month. No distress signals, no warnings, simply silence. Our scouts found nothing but debris fields and empty planets. Pirates, raiders from beyond the frontier. No, our analysts have examined the debris. The weapons used were unlike anything in our database. The destruction was total and methodical. Whatever did this was not interested in plunder. It was interested in extinction. Turned to face the young scholar. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we may have made a terrible mistake 50 years ago. We drove away the only species in the galaxy that solved problems out of genuine desire to help. And now, when we may need help more than ever, we have no idea where they are or if they would even answer our call." Far away, in a star system that appeared on no council charts, Captain Mitchell stood on the observation deck of the deep space vessel Horizon. Behind him, the lights of human civilization spread across the void. 2,000 worlds now, each one a testament to what humanity could build when no one was watching, when no one was holding them back. His communication officer approached with a data tablet. "Long-range sensors have picked up something unusual, Captain. Energy signatures from the core regions. Massive displacement events, like something very large is moving." Mitchell studied the readings. His expression remained calm, but his hands tightened on the railing. "How large?" Impossible to say at this distance. But if these readings are accurate, we are talking about objects that dwarf anything the Council ever built. Mitchell nodded slowly. Send the data to High Command. Mark it Priority 1. Should we investigate? No, we watch, we wait. Whatever is coming, it is not our problem. He turned back to the window, looking out at the stars that humanity now called home. Somewhere beyond those stars, the galaxy that had rejected them was about to learn a very old lesson. Pride comes before the fall, and the fall, when it came, would be absolute. 100 years after humanity walked away, the galaxy burned. They called it the Endless Swarm. Ancient records spoke of it in fragments, warnings left by civilizations that had died millions of years before the first drew breath. The precursor races had sealed them away in the galactic core, using technologies that no living species understood. The seals had held for eons. Now they had broken. The swarm emerged like a tide of darkness. Billions of creatures, each one a living weapon designed by evolution for a single purpose: consumption. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They did not stop. They simply fed, stripping worlds to bare rock and moving on to the next. High Counselor stood in the command center of the Council flagship, watching the tactical display with growing horror. The Battle of Prime had lasted 6 hours. The combined fleets of 12 species, over 40,000 warships, had engaged the swarm in what was supposed to be a decisive stand. The display showed nothing but red markers now, each one representing a destroyed vessel, a dead crew, a failed hope. "How many survived?" asked, his voice barely a whisper. 17 ships, High Counselor, the tactical officer replied, out of 43,000. Closed his 4 eyes. He had been born after the humans left. He had grown up hearing stories about the vermin who had dared to demand equality, who had fled like cowards when the Council put them in their place. He had never questioned those stories. Why would he? Everyone knew humans were inferior. Everyone knew the Council was supreme. Everyone had been wrong. "Send a message to the human coordinates," he ordered. "Use the old diplomatic frequencies. Beg them to respond." "We have been transmitting for 3 weeks, High Counselor. There has been no response." "Then transmit again, and again, and again, until someone answers." The message went out into the void. It traveled past dead worlds and burning stations, past refugee fleets packed with terrified civilians, past the expanding frontier of the swarm's conquest. It reached the edge of known space and continued into the darkness beyond. No one answered. On the human border world of New Montana, Admiral Gregg watched the carnage from the safety of distance. His command center was buried deep beneath the planet's surface, protected by defensive systems that the Council had never seen. Holographic displays showed him everything happening in Council space, every battle, every massacre, every desperate attempt to slow the tide. Dr. Torres stood beside him, her face pale. She was the lead scientist of Project Sentinel, the early warning system that had detected the swarm's emergence decades before it happened. Humanity had known this day was coming. They had prepared. 12 Council worlds have fallen in the first month, Torres reported. Estimated casualties are in the hundreds of billions. The is expected to fall within 6 weeks at current rates of advance. And the Council response? Scattered, disorganized. They are still arguing about resource allocation and command authority. Half their remaining fleet is defending that have already been bypassed. The other half is trying to evacuate civilians to colonies that will fall within months anyway. Nodded slowly. It was exactly what the strategic analysts had predicted. 1,000 years of unchallenged supremacy had made the Council soft. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. They had forgotten that the universe was not a gentle place. General entered the command center, his boots heavy on the metal floor. He was a large man with a face and cold eyes, the kind of soldier who had spent his entire life preparing for wars he hoped would never come. Now the war was here, and he was ready. "Our perimeter defenses are at full strength," reported. 12 carrier groups positioned along the border, planetary shields active on all major colonies. We can hold anything the swarm throws at us. "And if the swarm does not come to us?" Tors asked. "If it finishes with the Council and simply moves on?" "Then we wait, we watch, we continue to build," glanced at the displays showing the dying Council worlds. "Our duty is to protect humanity, not to die saving people who spent 3 centuries spitting on us." Tors looked uncomfortable. "There are civilians out there, children, beings who had nothing to do with how the Council treated us." "There were human children on New Helsinki when the Council refused to share the cure for plague," said quietly. 60 million dead because we were not worthy of help. Where was Council compassion then?" Tors had no answer. The days passed, the swarm advanced. Council worlds fell one after another, their names becoming entries in a growing list of the dead. Prime, Major, the Syndicate moons, worlds that had existed for millions of years, civilizations that had built wonders humanity could only imagine, all reduced to ash and silence. The messages kept coming. Desperate pleas from Council leaders, from military commanders, from ordinary citizens who had somehow learned the old human frequencies. They begged for help. They promised anything: full membership, technology, resources, apologies. Humanity listened to every message. They recorded every word, and they did not respond. In his quarters, Admiral sat alone in the darkness, listening to a recording. It was a child, no more than 10 years old, crying for her parents as her world burned around her. The transmission had cut off mid-scream when the swarm reached her location. Played the recording 3 times. Then he deleted it, stood up, and walked back to the command center. "Any change in status?" he asked. "No, Admiral. The swarm continues to advance. Council space is approximately 30% consumed. Continue monitoring. Report any changes immediately." He returned to his station and watched the galaxy die, his face as still as stone. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the swarm fed and grew and spread. It had no mind that could be reasoned with, no weakness that could be exploited, no desire except hunger. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. The swarm would consume it in less than 5. And humanity, safe behind its borders, simply watched and waited for the silence to come. The ship that appeared at the human border was barely functional. Its hull was with plasma burns and impact craters. Its engines flickered with the last sparks of failing power cells. It drifted more than flew, carried by momentum and desperation toward the patrol vessels that had been tracking it for hours. Fleet Admiral studied the vessel from the bridge of the battleship Resolute. His face showed nothing, but his mind was working through possibilities with cold precision. Life signs. One Admiral, old, barely alive. Weapons. None functional. Considered for a moment. 100 years ago, his great-grandfather had served under Admiral Daniel Brooks during the evacuation. The old man had told stories about the Council, about the laughter and the contempt, about the look on Ambassador Harmon's face when she realized that nothing would ever change. Those stories had shaped his entire life. "Bring it aboard," he ordered. "Have medical standing by, and inform Ambassador Harmon that we have a visitor." Ambassador Lisa Harmon II was 51 years old, almost exactly the same age her grandmother had been on the day humanity left the Council. She had her grandmother's dark hair and steady eyes, and she carried the same calm dignity that had defined the Harmon family for generations. She arrived at the medical bay just as the survivor was being stabilized. The creature on the bed was ancient. His gray skin had faded to near transparency, and his bioluminescent patterns were so dim they were barely visible. But his 4 eyes were still sharp, still aware, still carrying the weight of memories that stretched back more than a century. "Counselor," Lisa said softly, "I know who you are." The old turned his head to look at her. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You look like her, the ambassador, the one who walked away." "She was my grandmother." Made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "I remember that day. I remember laughing. I remember thinking that your kind would come crawling back within a year." His voice broke. "I was such a fool." Lisa pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. "Why are you here?" "To beg." Tears leaked from his 4 eyes, running down his withered cheeks. 70% of council space is gone. The great powers that ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years are broken. They are extinct. The syndicate of moons is a debris field. My own people are scattered across refugee ships, dying slowly from starvation and despair. I have seen the reports. Then you know we have nothing left. No fleet, no resources, no hope. Reached out with a trembling hand. "Please, you must help us. You are the only ones who can." Lisa looked at his hand but did not take it. 100 years ago, my grandmother stood before your council and asked for help. She asked for fair trade. She asked for medical technology. She asked simply to be treated as equals. Do you remember what you said? His hand fell back to his chest. "We called you vermin, children, evolutionary accidents." "Yes, you did." Lisa reached into her pocket and removed a small data crystal. "This contains records of every insult, every denial, every act of discrimination against humanity over 3 centuries of our membership, every petition rejected, every request ignored, every life lost because you could not be bothered to share what you had. My grandmother compiled these records. She wanted future generations to remember." "I remember enough," whispered. Do you remember the plague on New Helsinki? 60 million dead because we were not worth saving. Do you remember the border war that destroyed our colony on Acheron? 15 million more, killed by weapons you could have helped us defend against. Do you remember every human who died in service to a council that saw them as nothing more than useful animals? Yes, the word came out as barely a breath. I remember all of it. Lisa leaned forward. Then you understand why I am about to tell you that the Human Assembly has voted on your request for aid. The result was nearly unanimous. Hope flickered in his eyes. The answer is no. The hope died. Something broke behind those ancient eyes, something that had been holding together through sheer will and desperation. Turned his face away, and his body shook with silent sobs. "We could have stood together," Lisa said quietly. "We could have built something beautiful. Humans and 1,000 other species, united against whatever darkness the universe held. But you chose contempt. You chose cruelty. You chose to believe that because we were different, we were lesser. We were wrong. Yes, you were. And now you face the consequences of a galaxy you claim to rule but never truly understood." Lisa stood and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold and looked back at the broken figure on the bed. "My grandmother smiled when she walked out of that council chamber. Do you know why?" Shook his head weakly. "Because she knew this day would come. Not the swarm exactly, but something like it. She knew that any civilization built on arrogance and cruelty would eventually face its reckoning. She could have fought back. She could have argued and begged and pleaded for another 300 years. Instead, she chose to walk away. She chose to give humanity a future free from your contempt. That was her gift to us." "And what happens now?" Lisa's expression softened just slightly. "We will not help you, but we will not harm you either. You are free to leave. Find whatever survivors remain. Build what you can from the ashes. And remember, when you tell your children about how the Great Council fell, remember that it was not destroyed by the swarm. It was destroyed by its own hubris. The swarm was just the instrument." She left without another word. Secretary General Amy was waiting in the corridor. She was a small woman with kind eyes, the sort of leader who had risen to power not through ambition but through genuine desire to serve. How did he take it? Badly, as expected. Nodded slowly. Do you think we made the right choice? Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Through the walls, she could hear the muffled sobs, the sound of a being who had lost everything and knew that no one was coming to save him. I think we made the only choice we could, she finally said. They taught us that the galaxy is cruel and that the strong survive by taking from the weak. We learned a different lesson. We learned that the strong survive by walking away from those who would drag them down. And the innocent, the children who never chose any of this. Lisa closed her eyes. They haunt me. They will haunt all of us for the rest of our lives, but we cannot save everyone. We can only save ourselves. And perhaps when the darkness passes, we can build something better from what remains. She walked away, leaving the old counselor to his grief and the galaxy to its fate. The swarm died the way all things die when they have consumed everything. It starved. Without new worlds to feed upon, without new civilizations to devour, the hive intelligence that had guided billions of creatures began to fragment. The swarm turned on itself, individual organisms fighting for the last scraps of energy, the last traces of organic matter. Within months, the great tide that had swept across the galaxy had become scattered pockets of dying creatures, and then nothing at all. The galaxy fell silent. Captain Cole stood on the observation deck of the survey vessel Pioneer, watching the void where the Council capital had once orbited a dying star. The great station was gone now, shattered into a debris field that stretched for thousands of miles. Fragments of living crystal drifted through space, catching the weak red light and scattering it like tears. "Sensor sweep complete, Captain," his science officer reported. "No life signs in this system. Radiation levels are declining. It should be safe to approach the debris field." Cole nodded slowly. "Take us in. Mark and catalog everything. This is history now." The Pioneer moved through the wreckage like a ghost through a graveyard. They passed broken ships from a dozen species, their hulls torn open and their interiors stripped clean by the swarm. They passed fragments of stations and habitats, the last remnants of civilizations that had existed for millions of years. They passed the frozen bodies of the dead, preserved by the cold of space, their faces still twisted in expressions of fear and disbelief. Cole had seen death before. Every human officer had, in the simulations and training exercises that prepared them for conflicts that might never come. But nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing could prepare anyone for the sight of an entire galaxy brought to ruin. "Captain," the sensor officer called out, "I am picking up a faint life sign, single source, coming from a stasis pod in the lower debris field." Cole frowned. "Survivors?" "Possibly. The pod appears functional. Should I bring it aboard?" "Do it." The stasis pod was small and battered, clearly designed for emergency use rather than long-term preservation. The being inside was a massive creature whose armored plates had faded to a dull gray. According to the pod's records, he had been in stasis for nearly 4 years, since the day the swarm had reached the Council capital. When they revived him, he opened his eyes slowly and looked around the medical bay with confusion that gradually transformed into understanding, and then into despair. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough from years of disuse. "You are aboard the human survey vessel Pioneer," Cole replied. "You were found in a stasis pod in the debris field of the Council capital." "The Council, yes." The closed his eyes. "I was there when it fell. I was a junior administrator, nothing important. When the swarm breached the station, I found an emergency pod and launched. I thought rescue would come. I thought someone would save us." "No one came." "No, no one did." He opened his eyes again and studied Cole with a mixture of curiosity and grief. "You are human." "Yes." "We called you vermin. I remember the jokes, the songs, the casual contempt we showed your kind for 300 years. that made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. And now you are the only ones left. Cole said nothing. Why did you not save us? The question hung in the air. Cole had asked himself the same thing countless times over the past years. He had watched the reports from Council Space, the desperate battles and the falling worlds, and he had wondered if humanity could have made a difference. He had wondered if they should have tried. Because you never asked us to be your equals, he finally said. You asked us to be your servants. When we refused, you told us we were nothing, so we became nothing to you. We disappeared. We left you to face the consequences of a galaxy you claimed to rule but never truly understood. There was silence for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? Yes, we were given every chance to treat you with dignity. We chose contempt instead. We built our greatness on the belief that we were superior, that other species existed only to serve us. And when the darkness came, we discovered that greatness built on such foundations is no greatness at all. Cole studied the broken creature before him. This was the last of the final survivor of a species that had numbered in the trillions. In his faded armor plates and defeated eyes, the entire history of the Council was written. We are giving you a ship, Cole said. Small but functional, enough supplies to last several years. We are also giving you the coordinates of any survivor colonies our scouts have identified. Hope flickered briefly in his eyes. There are survivors. Some, scattered across the rim. Maybe a few million beings in total, from species that once numbered in the hundreds of billions. Why are you helping me? Because we are not like you. We do not leave people to die simply because they are different. We did not intervene to save the Council because we had no obligation to sacrifice our children for people who hated us. But we are not cruel. We will not prevent you from trying to rebuild. The lowered his head. Thank you. Do not thank us. Just remember, when you tell your children about how the Great Council fell, remember that it was destroyed by its own hubris. Remember what happens when those with power forget those without it. 2 weeks later, the small vessel departed human space, carrying the last survivor of a dead empire into the void. Dr. Torres stood in the memorial hall on the human capital world of New Terra, surrounded by monuments to the dead. Each pillar bore the name of a species that had been erased from existence. Syndicate, 1,000 more, trillions of lives reduced to names carved in stone. She was old now, her hair white and her hands trembling. She had spent decades trying to understand the swarm, trying to find some way to predict when it might return. Now the work was done, and she was left with nothing but memories. Fleet Admiral entered the hall and walked slowly to her side. He too had aged, though his eyes still held the same cold patience they had shown when humanity watched the galaxy burn. The last colony ships have launched, he reported. Human population is now spread across over 5,000 worlds. We have become something the old Council could never imagine. And what is that? Torres asked. Survivors, the only species that walked through the darkness and emerged on the other side. He looked at the monuments surrounding them. These will remind us. These will make sure we never become what they were. Torres nodded slowly. Do you think we made the right choice, watching them die instead of trying to help? Was quiet for a long moment. I think we made the only choice we could. They spent 300 years teaching us that the galaxy was cruel, that power was everything, that the weak existed to serve the strong. In the end, we learned something different. We learned that true strength is not in conquest or domination. It is in building something that can survive when everything else falls apart. And the innocent who died because of our choice. They haunt me. They will haunt all of us forever, but we could not save everyone. We could only save ourselves. Perhaps that makes us monsters, or perhaps it just makes us human. He turned and walked toward the great window that overlooked the city. Below, millions of people went about their lives. building and growing and dreaming of futures that stretched beyond the stars. They were the children of those who had walked away, the heirs of a choice made a century ago by an ambassador who had decided that dignity was worth more than servitude. "What do we call this new era?" Tors asked, joining him at the window. Looked out at the city, at the people, at the ships rising toward the heavens. "The age of silence. Let it remind us what happens when those with power forget those without it." Humanity spread across the stars, not as conquerors, but as inheritors of a galaxy that had destroyed itself through arrogance. They built monuments on dead worlds, not to celebrate victory, but to remember the price of hubris. They found survivors where they could, offered what help they could spare, and tried to build something better from the ashes of what had been. And in the great emptiness between stars, where the light of dead civilization still traveled toward distant shores, the silence endured. It was a silence of endings and beginnings, of lessons learned too late and wisdom gained through suffering. It was the silence of a galaxy that had been given every chance to be something beautiful and had chosen instead to be something cruel. The silence was the only monument the Council deserved, and humanity, alone among the stars, would make sure it was never forgotten.